My experiences of COVID-19. I know that people say that COVID is a bit like flu, but I have to say from my own personal experience that it's nothing remotely like flu. I've had flus and colds all my life, and this virus is nothing like either cold virus or flu virus. Having said that, most of the experiences I've had of flu viruses have been that they've been extremely nasty, but very short-lived. I had one 3 years ago. It was half a week of sheer hell. And then it went, and that was it. It was gone. However, COVID seems to be slightly different. And again, people's experiences of COVID vary greatly. Apparently, only 2% of people get it in the stomach. And yet there's absolutely no question that where my COVID started was in the stomach. It started with a mild fever and stomach cramps, and the stomach cramps were very nasty. But they probably only lasted 36 hours with a very sensitive stomach for the next few days after that, and some diarrhea. If the cramps had been persistent instead of intermittent, it would have been hell on earth, but because they were only intermittent, they were bearable. 5 days in, I had suddenly it came back in full force. You know, I was feeling okay when I went to have an afternoon siesta on the Tuesday, the 5th day. And when I woke up again, I felt absolutely terrible. I'm convinced it was either in my kidneys or in my bladder, because I had to go and urinate every half an hour for that evening. However, the next day, it seemed my bladder had certainly fixed itself. But I was still with the fever, and then within another day, i.e. within 7 days of actually getting COVID, the fever went and has not returned. It wasn't too heavy a fever. It was the kind of fever that you can fix with a single paracetamol. But again, I was a bit reluctant to do that because, of course, the reason the body generates fever when you have a virus is precisely in order to make life difficult for the virus, because viruses don't like fever. And therefore I was quite reluctant to actually take paracetamol. Since then, I've been kind of feeling okay, but pretty weak. And I have to say, today is day 18, and I'm still feeling pretty weak. But the only other real symptoms I had a slightly swollen eyelid a few days ago. And then probably the most disturbing one of all, on my left shoulder blade, right behind, I had something that I can only describe as a sore. And it's still there, but not as bad as it was. While turning over in bed a few nights ago, it was so painful that it literally made me cry out for about a minute or two. And again, I don't know what that is. There's no sign of it on my back. I assume it's COVID because I cannot think what on earth else it would be. And I tested positive for COVID a week ago. And so did many of the members of my family, including my 7-month-old baby boy, including my 2-year-old daughter. But they haven't shown any symptoms at all. They've just continued on healthily. And again, thinking contemplatively, I really ask myself, well, why aren't they letting people like me who've had COVID, who now have the antibodies against COVID, why do we have to wear masks when we go out or into the shops? Why do we supposedly have to take the vaccine? I have no intention of taking the vaccine because I don't take medicines unnecessarily. And basically, science is saying that 8 months minimum immunity you get from having COVID. And obviously, if the vaccine gives immunity for the rest of your life, then so will COVID. And if the vaccine only gives immunity for a year, then so will COVID. in which case, sure, I would then take the vaccine in a year's time. But I've no intention of taking it now. For instance, with my 9-year-old stepson, he's had COVID, and yet the Spanish authorities, because I live in Spain, will insist that he wears a mask when going to school, when he goes back to school, in spite of the fact that this is a great cruelty and child abuse, and in his case, completely unnecessary. Because, like all the members of my family, including me who've had COVID, we can now neither get nor give COVID. And it's about time the government, not merely the Spanish government, but governments throughout the world, started taking note of this and started treating people who have had COVID as people with complete immunity.